Yes,
I've just started now,
just
Chair.
come up.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please note, all guests will have their microphones muted when they join the meeting. You'll be asked to remain on mute unless I ask you to speak. For example, in the 3-minute slots reserved for objectors, the applicant, supporters and ward councillors. Please do not switch on your microphone until I have given you permission to speak. Attendees who are using the telephone dial-in function on a smartphone are also muted. If I ask you to speak, please dial *6 to unmute yourself. To ensure that this virtual meeting runs smoothly, only one individual will be allowed to speak at any time. Any person speaking must be permitted to finish what they're saying without interruption. If I request that an individual stop speaking, they should do so immediately. Interruptions may result in you being disconnected from this meeting. If a member of the subcommittee wishes to speak, could I ask them to indicate via the raise hand symbol or on the message board? Members of the public are reminded that the message board is not for public use. Any messages left on the message board by members of the public will be disregarded by subcommittee members. Bearing in mind that this meeting is live streamed and that a recording will be available on the Council's YouTube channel, if you are planning to speak, you may choose to switch off your camera so that only your voice will be heard. Members of the public who are disconnected from the meeting due to technical difficulties should use the link or dial-in instructions they were sent initially to return to the meeting. Members of the public are welcome to record, screenshot or tweet the public proceedings of the meeting. A copy of the Council's protocol for reporting and filming is available on Southwark website. During the meeting, members of this subcommittee will not access the internet except as it relates to the official business of the meeting. Send or receive emails, text messages or tweets concerning the business of the subcommittee to anyone outside the meeting. Please note that the members may be accessing the agenda packs via the internet. We will be taking 5-minute screen breaks every hour and reconvene afterwards. I would now like officers to introduce themselves and explain their roles in the meeting. Firstly, Tim.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Whittam. My name is Tim Cutts, and I'm here to represent the Director of Planning and to advise members of the subcommittee on planning and general issues relating to the applications being considered today.
Dipesh.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Dipesh Patel. I'm a planning officer here to present item 7.1345 Southwark Park Road.
Alicia.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Alicia from the Old Kent Road Planning and Regeneration team, and I'm the case officer for the second development management item this evening.
And now legal officer, Margaret.
Good evening, Chair. My name is Margaret Foley. I'm the legal officer for this meeting. My role is to advise members of the subcommittee on planning legislation and legal matters related to planning. Thank you.
And the clerk, Beverly.
Yeah, my name is Beverly Olamajulo and I'm the constitutional officer and clerk of this subcommittee, and I'm here to minute the meeting and to advise on any procedures for the hearing of the items.
Thank you. We move on to item 2, apologies. Have we received any apologies for this meeting?
None received, Chair. I think we're all present.
Yes, I think so. We're just going to confirm the voting members under item 3. I'll ask the members of the subcommittee to confirm they are a voting member of this committee. Councillor Adele Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I'm the Vice Chair of the subcommittee and I'm a voting member.
Councillor Maggie Browning.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, confirming that I'm a voting member.
Councillor Sonal Chopra. You're on mute.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. I'm a voting member. Thank you.
Councillor Martin Seaton.
I can confirm, Chair, I'm a voting member.
Councillor Richard Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I can confirm I'm a voting member.
Councillor Jane Salmon.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I confirm I'm a voting member.
Thank you. I can confirm too that I'm a voting member of this subcommittee. So we move to item 4, which is notification of any items of business which I deem urgent. Now, we have had representations about item 7.3, 17 to 19 Blackwater Street, SE 228SD. And I would like to propose a motion that this item is deferred so that members can conduct a site visit and receive any further information that is relevant to this application. Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second that, Chair. Oh.
Everybody's got their hand up. Thank you, Adele. All those in favour of deferring item 7.3, Unit 7 and 8, 17 to 19 Blackwater Street, are we agreed?
Agreed, Chair.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Chair. Agreed.
Thank you.
Agreed, Chair.
Thank you very much. So that item has been deferred to a future meeting. The following additional documents have been circulated before this meeting. Supplemental agenda number 1, containing the addendum report relating to item 7.1 and 7.2 actually, and a members pack received, not circulated due to the file size. So has everybody seen the members pack and the addendum report?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. So item 5 is disclosure of interests and dispensations. Does any member wish to declare any interest or dispensation in respect of any item or issue to be considered at this meeting?
No, Chair.
No, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, minutes, pages 1 to 5 of the agenda pack. Can we approve these minutes as the correct records of the meeting held on 13th of October 2020? Are these minutes agreed?
Agreed.
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 Thank you. Item 7, development management. The next item of business concerns the determination of planning applications. I would like to remind everyone of the subcommittee guidance on the conduct of business. Firstly, officers will present the report, outline their recommendations and answer questions raised by the subcommittee. Then, if present and wishing to speak, the following may then address the subcommittee for no more than 3 minutes each. One spokesperson representing any objectors to the application. By now, you need to have identified a single spokesperson. If more than one objector wishes to speak, the time will be divided accordingly within the 3-minute time slot. Secondly, the applicant or their agent will have their 3-minute slot, and then one spokesperson representing any supporters of the application who live within 100 metres of the development site. And last but not least, a ward councillor representing the area affected by the proposal. Each speaker should restrict their comments to the planning aspects of the proposal and should avoid repeating information which is already in the report. The meeting is not a hearing where all participants present evidence to be examined by other participants. At the end of each representation, the subcommittee may ask questions of the presenter. Speakers should lead the subcommittee to subjects on which they would welcome further questioning. Ward members in attendance and those nominated to speak on behalf of objectors, supporters and applicants may be asked to make further brief contributions in case any issues need to be clarified after they have addressed the meeting. This is not an opportunity to take part in the debate of the subcommittee. After receiving all submissions, the subcommittee will debate the application and consider the recommendation. This is a council subcommittee meeting which is open to the public, and there should be no interruptions from members of the public. Finally, I would like everyone present to know that the planning subcommittee comprises members from different political parties, and we are not politically whipped. Our decisions are made in accordance with the council's planning policy and based on the information contained within the relevant reports, together with consultation responses and any verbal submissions made today. How we approach these applications is set out in the Development Management Report at item 7, and if members are happy to note that report, we will move on to consider the planning applications. Are members so happy?
Yes, Chair.
Noted. Yes.
Thank you. So we're going to move on now to consider item 7.1, Southwark Park Day Centre, 345 Southwark Park Road, London SE16 2JN, pages 10 to 64 of the main agenda pack and the relevant pages of the addendum report. So, Dipesh, I believe you are presenting.
Thank you, Chair. Gerald or Beverly, could you make me a co-host so I can share my screen, please?
That's done now.
Thank you. Okay, I should be sharing my screen. Do let me know if you can see,
I can see
the
that.
front
Yes.
page of the presentation. Thank you. Okay. So the first item with you today, members of the committee, is development at 345 Southwark Park Road. The site here, actually, let me just go to an aerial photograph. That should be better. That's, I think, explains the site a bit better. So the site there is just where that pin is. It's formerly a daycare centre run and owned by the council. It's been vacant for some time. I think since about 2017. There are building guardians in there at the moment, and its use that became surplus to requirements. I think this aerial photograph with the vans at the back is prior to 2017. So the proposal is for a part 7, part 6 story building that would provide 46 new homes, 22 of which would be council houses. There's also a proposal to provide 340 square meters of office or community floor space on the ground floor, children's play space, communal amenity space, and some hard and soft landscaping. And as you can tell from this aerial image, the area is predominantly residential and has a scale of about 3 to 4 stories in the immediate surroundings. I think, Chair, you mentioned an addendum report, which I'll also refer to in my presentation. So for this application, we have had a total of 122 objections, including late representation from a resident representing the Southwark Park Residents Action Group. And this was around daylight and sunlight. The main themes of the objection have been impact on amenity, including daylight and sunlight, impact during construction, the height, scale and massing of the proposed scheme, the removal of some trees, which I will come on to, and parking and transport impact. So moving on to the land use, the site, as I mentioned, has been empty since 2017. It's a D-class use, which is protected under policy 2.1 of the Southwark plan. I'll go back to the presentation. in there. And so there would be a loss of D-class floor space with this development. The policy allows for loss to occur where the use is no longer needed, and that's the case here. Notwithstanding that, some floor space would be re-provided, so that 340 square meters would be flexible office and community use. The council will retain control over that space and make it available for the community if the demand arose. I don't think there's any firm plan for what that use might be, so that's why the flexibility was kept. So this is our site here. As you can see, it's a fairly modest building in terms of height compared to some of its neighbours. I'll just go through a few photographs here. These are dwellings at Fenner Close. I'll mention those when I come on to talk about impacts on neighbours. And this is a view up Layard Road and a picture of the Southwark Park Estate. This is a building to the east, which is a housing association office building. So in terms of trees, that 2 trees would be lost as a result of this development. So if I can zoom in, it's the tree with the I think that's red. Forgive me, I'm colorblind, but that looks like red hatching to me there and here in the middle. So two of the smaller trees on the site. And if I go back to the aerial photograph and indicate which trees they are. So it's this tree here next to the vans that are parked, and this middle sort of darker leaved tree between those two larger trees either side. So those 2 would be lost. They are white beam trees. They're category B trees, but there would be replacement planting, which is shown on the eastern part of the site. So a number of trees we provided there and also around the site. So as you can see in this plan, the resultant canopy cover would be about 138 square meters, which is much better than the 90 square meters at the moment, and then there's a condition to secure that. This slide here shows the landscaping plan and a little bit more detail, including an area just at the top of your screen. So the part to the right is the children's doorstep play space for children up to 5 years old, and there's also parking for on-site parking for blue badge holders. So the requirement for play space on the site is 263 square meters. So there is a shortfall, and that's due to a number of factors, but principally the competing requirements of trying to get meet various other policies on the site, such as parking for blue badge holders and communal amenity space. So there's a shortfall of 163 square meters, which would need to be dealt with through a payment in lieu. The dwelling mix is compliant with our policy, with 20% of the dwellings having 3 or more bedrooms. Density is also compliant in the urban area, which has a range of up to 700 habitable rooms per hectare. This scheme is at 680. The quality of accommodation, this slide here, forgive me, is the ground floor, and then you can see the flexible B1, D1 floor space there, and plant rooms and cycle storage. Quality of accommodation is pretty good. Vast majority of the dwellings would have dual aspect. Some dwellings, as you've got the building, you can see in the middle of the screen here, they would be single aspect, but they wouldn't be facing north, so that does comply with our policy. There is a shortfall in some of the outdoor amenity space balconies, effectively, and this is as a result of trying to reduce the massing of the building, or excuse me, trying to limit the massing of the building. And again, this would be compensated by payment in lieu. So on to impacts on amenity. The site, in terms of privacy, the site generally complies with our guidelines on our SPD of being 21 meters away from windows back to back and 12 meters across a road. There are some impacts on daylight and sunlight. So if I go back to the aerial here, so the biggest impacts on would be on the people living here on Fenner Close, and those buildings, those dwellings there overlooking the sites. And as you can see from this aerial photograph, it's slightly unusual for an urban site because it's fairly open. So those dwellings do enjoy a very good daylight and sunlight factors at the moment. This has been raised as an objection from most people. The initial survey conducted did not include a no skyline assessment. So we asked for that, and that was provided with on the where plans were available to the applicant, and a reconsultation was undertaken. So the daylight and sunlight for those dwellings on Fenner Close are, or the VSC, the vertical sky components, are very good at the moment, of 35% or above, and the reductions would be from about 20 to 37%. So proportionately fairly large reductions. Now, of the windows facing the site, 12 would have VSCs below 27%, and with reductions of more than 20%. But the remaining VSCs would still be very good for an urban area, or pretty good at 22 to 26, so between 22 and 26. And similarly for no skyline, 6 rooms were tested. There was 1 transgression, and the reduction was found to be 26%. You'll be aware that the threshold for a transgression is 20%. So they're the properties mostly affected. There are other properties nearby that would be affected to a lesser degree, though, and most of them would retain pretty good VSCs of around 20%. In terms of height scaling and massing, I'll go back to the presentation here. And I'll just run through a few elevations. So this is the western elevation and the south elevation as seen from Southwark Park Road. And this shows quite well the sort of articulation within the building and the difference in height. So as I mentioned, it is taller, or would be taller than most of the properties in the immediate surroundings. But that we as officers think is okay for this site. Partly because of the articulation and the way it's been designed, but also the fact that it's set in from most sides, and provides a sort of a bit of a breathing space, and it, as can be seen here, set back from the pavement, so wouldn't feel too harsh as one would walk around the site. Onto energy. 35% of the carbon savings can be met on site, with the remaining, which would need to be dealt with through an in lieu payment again. The reasons behind that are the limited roof space, and again, the sort of competing requirements to provide some other factors such as a green roof, which I'll talk about now. So the green roof will be provided. This is secured under condition 11, which would result in a greening, which would get fairly close to the urban greening factor in the draft London plan of 0.4. So we'll need to see details of that and see how close they can get to that. I would also just like to make the point that it is a draft policy at the moment, and the applicant will try their best to get up close to there as they can. The proposal would provide a biodiversity net gain with the green roofing that I've just mentioned, planting, and also the addition of bat and bird boxes. Some objectors have raised transport as a concern. The development is in CPZ, and any future occupiers would be prohibited from getting an on-street car parking permit. So there shouldn't be any impacts in that regard. There are a couple of parking spaces for blue badge holders, and I think going back to this side, I think in terms of the overall transport impact and journeys to and from, when you look at the daycare centre compared to a residential development or largely residential development, the journeys would be fewer because there'd be fewer journeys by car. So just to mention the addendum covers the objection from the local residents. We've also mentioned SIL in the addendum. So the development would need to provide £265,000 for mayoral SIL and £904,000 for Southwark SIL. This is before social housing relief. We've also recommended an amendment to condition 6 for landscaping for this condition to also include for details of play space to be provided. So in conclusion, the scheme would provide a redevelopment of the site. It would affect some neighbours in terms of daylight, but the resultant daylight would still be good for an urban location. There would be limited, if any, impacts on transport and parking. The scale and the massing is larger than the immediate surroundings, but again is acceptable because of the articulation and how it's been set back, reducing its impact on the streetscape, on townscape. The scheme, if granted planning permission, would result in the redevelopment of a building that's no longer in use. It would result in 46 new homes, of which 22 would be council houses at social rent, providing 50% affordable social rent housing on the site, and that's by habitable rooms. So officers recommend that the application is granted subject to conditions and the signing of a legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. We now look for any questions to Dipesh in clarification of any of his report. I'd like to just ask, how close is Fenner close to the back side of the building? Hello?
Hi, Chair. Sure. Just give me a moment. I will check that. It is in the report. Is it okay if I come back to that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Has anybody else got any questions? Oh, no. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. As Dipesh already said, it's a very massive development compared to what is the surrounding is there. So there'll be serious impact on the light and other issues. But there's another question which is concerning me, because as a massive development, there's only 2 disabled parking there, and also that area is very restricted about the parking, loading, unloading. So are we going to have, or is there any provision we can have more parking spacing for disabled? And number 2, is there any possibility of having some visitor parking, because site is very massive, so, and restrictions are already in place surrounding area? So what are your thoughts on that, on this? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. In terms of disabled parking, so there would be 5 wheelchair. I think there are 5 wheelchair units. But what we've found is that not everyone who might occupy one of those units would actually drive a car. So there's an under provision. So it's a balance to be struck between providing some parking on site, but also using that space, that land, to provide something else, such as play space. So in this case, because of its location near to transport hubs, we felt that it was appropriate to not to have every single wheelchair affordable dwelling to have access to on-site parking, because in our experience, not everyone who occupies one of those dwellings has or uses a car. So that's the reason we thought two would be acceptable in this locality. Your second question was about visitor parking. So visitors may be able to drive, and they would have to comply with the parking restrictions within the CPZ. So if there are meters nearby where they could park, they would have to use those. Otherwise, they would need to not use a car and travel by public transport.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Thank you.
Dipesh, I found it at paragraph 66, 17.8 meters.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
So are we considering that as to be across the road at 12 meters or back to back?
Yes, it's a service road, so we consider it to be across the road at 12 meters.
Okay. Any other questions of clarification for the officer? In that case, we'll move on to the objectors. I've got two registered objectors, Shelley Griffith and Sarah Henderson. Are you both here?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, I'm here, Shelley Griffith.
Okay, lovely. This meeting is being live streamed and a recording will be available on the YouTube channel. So you may choose to switch off your camera should you wish, so that just your voice will be heard, and address the meeting with audio only. When you're introducing yourselves, please only give your first name and the block or street in which you live, not the exact address. So what we'll do now is if you can both introduce yourselves, and once you've done that, I will give you 3 minutes. Now, are you splitting it 50-50 or is one of you speaking?
I'm speaking for 2 minutes.
Okay,
On this
are
application.
you first?
If that's okay, yeah, I'll go first, that's fine.
Okay, so if you'd like to both introduce yourselves.
My name's Sarah Henderson. I specialise in planning objections. So we're a planning objection company, essentially, and we've been instructed to assist in this case.
And Shelley?
I'm Shelley. I live on Southwark Park Estate. I'm speaking for the Resident Association and all those local 4 sides of the development.
Okay, so when Sarah's done her 2 minutes, I will indicate that 2 minutes is up. Okay, perfect. Whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Speak to voice professional concern about this proposal. Refusal would be the best outcome. However, a reduction in the scale, such as reducing the height by at least 2 stories, should be implemented, as this would help mitigate adverse impact upon residential amenity if permission is regrettably granted. An independent live surveyor has assessed submitted information. Like matters remain unresolved within the officer report. The acceptance of any daylight and sunlight reduction to the neighbours should be borne exclusively against the BRE guidelines. The report references alternative targets set by Southwark Council. However, acceptability should be predicated solely on the BRE guidelines. The VSC and the NSL tests need to be looked at together as confirmed by High Court precedent. They are not sequential tests. The report has lent weight towards the ADF. The BRE does not generally recommend this assessment be used. The report does not identify or contain the appendices which show the floor plans that have been sourced, nor are there any NSL contour plots. The conclusion states the minority of rooms fail the NSL by small margins. However, this is misleading as they've actually tested very few rooms. By completing additional daylight assessment, the applicant has conceded the principle of reducing the height of the development. This should be implemented. A 7-storey development will be overbearing compared to existing local dwellings. Proposed storey levels must be reduced if adverse amenity impact is to be sufficiently mitigated. The proposal thus contradicts paragraph 127 from the NPPF, section 6 from the Building for Life document, C1 from the National Design Guide, and policy 7.7 from the London Plan and policy 3.13 from the Southwark Local Plan. The report has indicated that the massing is appropriate given the corner context. However, the massing will still be significant. The committee must still consider whether it is truly a suitable site for significantly scaled development. Paragraph 126 from the NPPF, section 6 from the Building for Life, C1 from the National Design Guide, policy 7.4 and 7.7 from the London Plan, and policies 3.13 and 3.20 from the Southwark Local Plan will not be sufficiently met. The officer report has focused almost exclusively upon sunlight and daylight impacts. And as such, we really would appreciate that even if recommendation is for approval, the matters outlined here must be given all due consideration and proposed development must be reduced in height to mitigate adverse residential amenity impacts. Thank you.
Shelley?
I'm a barrister, MRICS Chartered Surveyor. I've worked for local authority, including for planning, and on planning gain negotiations. Today is your opportunity to hear from the locals who say that 7 stories is too high here. Today is your opportunity to hear 133 voices who have written objections from all 4 sides of the development, who say that 7 stories dwarfs our 2, 3, and 4-story homes, plunging them into darkness. Today is your opportunity, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Committee, to say to the private sector they must work harder for the community, reduce profits, especially with a multi-million-pound grant, and resubmit with a 5-story plan, using wider footprint if necessary. I urge you to heed those local voices. Restrict this to 5 stories.
Thank you. Questions to the objectors? Anybody got a question? Councillor Salmon? I would urge people to use their blue hands, but
Sorry, Chair, yes. Sarah, thank you very much for your I'm so sorry, you piled it all in together. It whipped past terribly quickly. Could you just expand a little bit for me as to what you feel are the main reasons? You said certain things wouldn't meet certain, limits or needs. Would you mind expanding just a little bit? Because it went past a little bit quickly for me. You did a very good job, by the way, but if you could, that would be most appreciated.
I appreciate that, and it's quite difficult to package 2 minutes,
yes,
which is difficult for people who do feel strongly about the development. Essentially, the independent light assessment that was done has questioned the information that was put forward by the applicant and does strongly suggest that the massing and the height of this development is still going to have adverse impact on residential amenity for existing residents, but also future residents as well. So I appreciate in the case in Dipesh's commentary earlier that that certain policies will be met by this development and it will assist in meeting certain local policies and local plans. But from sort of considering the sheer scale and the massing and where it is in relation to existing dwellings and the impact on existing and future residents, I think those amenity aspects are actually significant enough to at least reduce the scale of the proposal, if not refuse it. And I appreciate that it's quite an ask to refuse, but from my understanding and assessment of the application, from having done multiple objections in various London authorities, I do feel that the actual location of this development isn't quite right for the scale compared to existing dwellings and the impact that's going to have on residents.
Councillor Morris?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for your presentations, both of you. I note that you are both planning professionals of some kind, and surely though, because of that, you understand that our choices are that we either refuse the application or we approve the application. We can't, in this committee, ask for 2 stories to be lobbed off, because we're looking at what's in front of us, and you can't just take off 2 stories without doing a whole load of other things. So and I just confirm that you understand that it's either an approval or a refusal on what we see before us today. Thank you.
Yes, I appreciate that. I feel like it's something that could potentially be negotiated or deferred if further information could be provided by the applicant, taking into account the scale. So if it was something where the committee were not sure and they wanted to go back and have further plans provided which produced reduced levels, taking that into account more, that would be something that I would be suggesting. I appreciate you've got your job to do and you've got to make that decision here, but if it's something that you feel is significant enough in an issue, which I think it is, then it's something that could be deferred until further information has been provided to ensure that it's mitigating those impacts enough, because once it's through, it's not going to be something that residents can look back on and think, oh, that's acceptable to us, because it won't be.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Councillor
in answer to that, I would say in terms of black and white, it will be reject now and allow the developer to resubmit with a 5-storey using a wider footprint, if that's what they wish to do.
Councillor Seaton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And thank you for the objectives and the responses to earlier questions. And just to make sure, Sarah, you made a number of references, but you sped through them very quickly. I thought Councillor Salmon was going to ask you, can you just repeat a number of those references? I've got the Southwark planning in front of myself, so that's one. And two, maybe in fact I should have asked this of the opposite, but I'll ask you this question. This is urban Southwark as opposed to suburban Southwark. Mm-hmm. We are right in saying that. Just make sure. Other ones you can respond to that question anyway. We are in urban Southwark and not suburban Southwark. Just to make sure that that's clarified and understood. So my first question to Sarah, those references, you spread through them very quickly. I can't write that quickly. And can you both confirm this location is urban Southwark?
Thank you. Yes. Can you which sort of references would you like further
so many of them.
Obviously,
give me the most prominent reference that you think we should look at.
My sort of perspective is obviously usually from planning point of view rather than I'm not a light assessor. So I've obviously taken information that has been provided already from independent light assessment. I believe that's been passed through, but it references and refer to the overbearing development. National Planning Policy 127 from the NPPF about the section achieving well-designed places. I appreciate that the officer mentioned about the articulated design, and obviously that's under the design and that policy. But again, this does refer also to scale and massing amenity. Design's obviously not just an aesthetic thing; it's about how it functions in the area. I guess more locally, there's the London Plan Policy 7.7 and Policy 3.13 from the Southwark Local Plan is what I would also suggest referring to. Massing, as that's been something that's obviously quite a significant thing here. Again, paragraph 127 does apply. It's also a design issue. And policies 7.4 and 7.7 from the London Plan, and policies 3.13 and 3.20 from the Southwark Local Plan. And just to, again, in terms of the amenity, and again, amenity, it encompasses numerous things. It's not just, the space. There's lots of things that encompass amenity, which didn't quite round to saying. But there was a mention of open space before, and enclosing that private space is an amenity issue as well. So I think this development is going to do that. But those policies, again, you can look at the NPPF, you can look at the London Plan, and you can look at 3.12 and 3.13 from the Southwark Local Plan if you want to look at amenity considerations. So those would be where I point to if you're looking for specific references.
Thank you. And Chair Bucket, I'll just a follow-up question on that. And thank you for those references. I've just begun to browse through them. Would you acknowledge that this development distances from its neighbours is in excess of 18 metres, I believe, around the figure? Would you agree?
Fenner Close one is 17.8.
17, there you are, that's right. So it is complied in that regard.
Because it's across the road.
Yep, would you accept that as the case? We're discussing both design and overlooking overbearingness, but the distances between this particular building and its neighbours appears to be broadly in line with our policies.
Are you asking me? Sorry, or
either one of you. I'm simply want to understand. You're both quoting. You're both making references. I've looked at the references, so I'm now asking you: do you accept that this particular development, in terms of its distances from its neighbours, is policy compliant?
I would suggest that, I mean, we've come across this in other objections, and whilst technically that space standard is complied with, that shouldn't over sort of outweigh the other implications that policy is also minded towards guiding. So you can have an overbearing development even if those space standards are technically met. So that would be my interpretation of it. I appreciate that from your point of view, you're looking at it purely from a meeting policy criteria. But we do come across this where even if there is, and we have had applications refused before where, if there are those not national but the space standards are met, that still doesn't necessarily mean that those adverse amenity impacts are actually sufficiently addressed either. So I would suggest that it's a weighing up of all those policies rather than just saying, it just meets this meterage, therefore it's compliant.
Can you indulge me in one more question, Chair, if you don't mind?
Sorry, could I just I didn't hear what, sorry, so I didn't hear the distance which Dipesh said that Fenner was from the building, because
17.8 meters.
Yeah, so it's if the regulation or the guideline is 18, it's obviously closer.
No, it's 12.
I see. So looking at
okay,
I know that
if I can continue my question in that case, and if I may, as regards the BRE VSC guidance, they are only guidance, of course, and this is urban Southwark, which you've accepted, and therefore the issue of right to light and the impacts of neighbouring buildings is of course taken into account if you're in an urban setting. Would you accept that as being a sort of a general rule of thumb for this and other planning committees? This is but guidance. It is all buildings are likely to have some shading impacts, but we're in urban Southwark. So would you accept that as being sort of a general opinion that is so?
Well, a general opinion, yes, it's an urban area. Yes, but if that's the guidance, that those maths that I've looked at through the light assessment, that is the best guidance to be following. So even if it's in an urban location, I would suggest that should still be applied, even if it is guidance. Best guidance should still be followed. But I do appreciate it's an urban area, but that should still be taken into consideration.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Leeming.
Thank you. Also, I thank you for making those points to the objectors. But again, I was interested in your conversations, your points about the massing, and wondered how you. It seems to me that's a subjective point of view. How are you deciding that 7 stories is worse than 5 stories? Is that just because of it's 2 more stories, or is there some way of some technical thing that you're referring to? And do you have any visualization of what these new buildings will look like compared to the surrounding buildings?
I'm assuming that was addressed to one of us. Yes.
Yes, it was.
Yes, thank you. So in terms of the 7 stories, I appreciate, as has been pointed out, it's an urban area. And I appreciate that there is sort of a move towards higher scale buildings within, not necessarily the locality, but within the borough. But when assessing it, what I've done is I've looked at the immediate dwellings that are within the city, and I know they're not dwellings, there are other types of buildings there as well, and essentially assess that in the context of how much of a sort of scale and massing that is going to be in comparison to the other buildings. And it was mentioned within the Dipesh's case before that actually in the context of that vicinity and that area, it is a taller building, and it is going to be significantly noticed to be a taller building. And that 3 and 4 stories is the more typical range of height of the vernacular around there compared to 7 stories. So that's kind of where I've come from, and I do appreciate it's there are tall buildings in London, but again it comes back to suitability of site and that sort of naturally more residential type feel to the area, and how much of a dwarfing aspect that's going to have by having those additional stories. So, and you mentioned something about visualization of the, I mean, that's taken from plans that have been submitted. We have software we can look at from, yeah, I'm not a local resident to London, I appreciate that, but we obviously have software and everything that we can use and utilize to actually get a feel for the area as much as we can, especially during a pandemic. And yeah, so we've taken into context what's been submitted. We've looked at obviously the policies, we've looked at those representations they've given, the applicants given, and also in the context of precedent in the area and precedent further afield. And whilst there is precedent for those sorts of buildings slightly further afield and in different parts of London and the borough, just in that particular enclosed, well, that close, it's just, to my mind, and from objectively looking at it, it's not an appropriate scale building, and it's significantly massed compared to the others around there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the committee? In that case, I'd like to thank the objectors for their presentations, and please stick around for the rest of the meeting. I'm just looking at the clock and seeing it's 7:30 almost. Rather than break between the presentation and the questions for the applicant, let's take a 5-minute break now and come back for the